this is the crux, right? We're not necessarily going to talk about how to get people to care about things they don't care about. That's a difficult thing to do, and maybe not in keeping with somebody's best interest. But how do we get people to care about what they care about? How do we get them to refocus on the things that they've shown dedication, commitment to? They have a natural interest in it. They have goals set, but sometimes they can't keep those goals. I think that, you've found in your experience, Sean, that there's a great opportunity at the moment where a student really fails to deliver on something they're required to do.
Yeah. I mean, it's the magical question. I always think of, there's like some quote, and it's like the teens or the children are not motivated and they are not following through. And then it says like Aristotle, and it's like,
right.
This has been happening since the beginning of time. And what works? And so what I've found is that if you change the way you speak to a student, and everybody, and not only the way you speak, but also the format you take. So what I mean by that is, first off, when you're talking to a student, it should always be framed as a question in terms of what the outcome is supposed to be. So instead of saying, if you want to go to UCLA, you need to get, 1,500 on this or whatever it is. You say, where do you want to go to school? And they say, oh, I want to go to UCLA. Okay, well, if you're, preparing, what score, do you need to earn, right? And you already know in the back of your mind what it is, but you're starting to build that. You're helping them executively think about what goals they need to reach, right? So you're using a lot of solution-focused questioning. And if you take that approach when you're working with kids, and I'm sure both of you already do this, but this is for everybody else, when you take that approach where you're asking them to make a determination around what they want to reach all the time, if that's just the culture of how you interact with kids, you're executively empowering them every single step of the way. And so you start with the kid, right? We asking them questions, after they've signed up or are working with you or whatever it is. But then you build that into your interactions with the students and the parents. So one of the things that we do in my business is a thing called the family team meeting. So every 4 weeks when we're working together, we meet as a team and we start with what's going well. And the reason for that is if you start by giving a kid feedback, negative feedback right away, or you're not doing this, and this, that immediately shuts down what I call the affective filter. They tune out. They don't want to be there. They might even leave, or shut down their Zoom. So you have everybody share something that's going well. And then after that, you go to the kid and you say, okay, you've heard that you're, showing up for your meetings. You just got an A on your test. You've applied for one of your favorite colleges. What needs to change, or what do you need to do next? And ask them. They probably already know what their parents have been telling them over and over, but just asking them. And they say, well, I really need to, finish this application. And then, you turn to the parents. Is that also what you think is the next most important step? Yes, we agree. Okay, so I guess, the thing you brought up about making sure they put the dishes away, we can save that for later, because right now we need to focus on what they said is important and what you said is important. Because that's where parents, they struggle, right? Is they throw so much, right? They're just overwhelmed and they spew that overwhelm onto their kids. And it's understandable.
And the kids are overwhelmed too.
Right.
Absolutely.
But there are more important goals. There are priorities and there are lower priorities. And, getting into college or taking that next transitional step, whatever, applying for a job, there are priorities. And so we have to help kids and parents sift through that and use solution-focused questioning, or what we call motivational interviewing, to help them identify those priorities and empower them to move forward on those.
That's interesting. I never really thought about how many demands we put on our kids and how many things we tell them they have to do. But we aren't the filter. We're just the person like lobbing at them all the time. Right?
That's exactly right.
And the idea is actually thinking about that's overwhelming, and that actually, because then they can shut down, because they don't even know how to process to prioritize. So that's an excellent point that I'm going to take from this conversation.
Well, yeah, go ahead.
We had a conversation yesterday with an expert in memory, and we were talking about working memory and how you can overload working memory by just throwing 2 important questions at somebody at the same time.
Right.
And then it's like a computer, a computer will cycle because it can't process.
Yeah.
And our kids are living that. And I know that we as adults are living that, but we're speaking from the lens of adults that have taken on the responsibility that we want to cultivate stronger executive function in the students we work with. And we have to recognize that.
Yeah. And I wanted to add the little, I guess, the fold is that some kids actually are motivated by having a lot, right? And, you know, maybe that you can throw a lot at them. And that's that first most important factor is teacher estimates of achievement. If you know the kid actually likes to have everything laid out, that's not going to be dismotivating or unmotivating for them, then maybe that's what they need to do. But for the majority of kids I work with, most of them have ADHD. The working memory is challenged, or it might not be at the same capacity as their IQ. Like I know plenty of kids who have really high IQs, are incredible, but their working memory is really low. So they don't, they can't hold a bunch of things in their mind. So they need to externalize it and put it on notes or a calendar or whatever. So there's no one size fits all, but this is, I guess you could say, for most kids, especially kids with ADHD, focus on one big thing at a time, break it into parts, get everybody on board so they're all supporting towards that same goal.
It's funny when you're talking about, I'm thinking about parents who assume that role for their student. And rather than helping the student to gain those skills of executive functioning, the parent themselves may serve as the executive function. I'm curious.
Frontal lobe.
The executive assistant.
Right. Where they're so worried about their student not being able to be successful that they assume the responsibility, probably not realizing that there's got to be some transference. They've got to start to unload that to the student, but maybe it's parceling it out, right?
Yeah. Well, and here's a tip for parents who are doing that, because we got our helicopter parents, we got our bulldozer parents, we got all types of parenting. But if you're doing the executive thinking for your child and they're just writing, if you're telling them, okay, say this next, and they're just dictating it, they're not developing those executive skills. But here's what you can do as a parent. If let's say your kid's backpack is totally disorganized and they need to, put their assignments in each folder, right? So instead of telling them what to do and being the executive, kind of selector and decider of where things go, say, hey, I'm going to sit here with you and I just want you to tell me, where do I put each of these things, right? I'm going to just physically, so you're reducing the physical demand, but you're increasing the cognitive demand and giving them ownership over selecting where things go. And so that's something you can do, is you can be a helper, just don't take over the executive thought process, because that's where you start to create helpless kids.
That's such fantastic advice.